The rancher saves the young Apache woman. The chief roars, "Take 400 cattle and wed my daughter." John McAllister, a tall, broad-shouldered rancher with weathered hands and a face lined by years under the harsh sun, was moving among his cattle. His horse, Dusty, a strong bay stallion, followed closely as John checked each animal, making sure none had wandered too far. The herd had grown large over the past few years, and he took pride in keeping them safe and healthy. Life on the ranch was often lonely, but John found peace in the rhythm of work, the whisper of the wind through the grasses, and the quiet companionship of his animals. As John guided the last of the cows toward the corral, he noticed something unusual in the distance. A thin plume of smoke curled upward near the canyon edge, rising above the rolling hills like a signal. At first he thought it might be a campfire or a signal from another rancher, but something in the way the smoke moved made him pause. It was sudden, sharp, almost frantic, as if it had been raised in a hurry. John tightened his grip on the reins and nudged Dusty forward. The canyon was a half-mile away, and as he approached, the sound of shouting reached his ears. High-pitched cries mingled with low, angry voices, and his instincts told him trouble was near. He slowed Dusty to a cautious walk, scanning the rocky outcrops and the narrow paths that wound through the canyon. Then he saw her. A young Apache woman, barely more than a girl, ran along a narrow trail with a group of men close behind. Her long, dark hair flew behind her like a banner, and her clothes, though simple, were torn in places from the brush and rocks she had navigated. She carried nothing but herself, yet her determination was clear in the set of her shoulders and the way she refused to falter despite the danger. The men chasing her shouted words John could not understand, and the clatter of their boots against stone echoed through the canyon. He knew instantly that she was in danger. He had heard stories of travelers being attacked or kidnapped in these parts, but he had never imagined stumbling across such a scene himself. Without thinking, he spurred Dusty forward, racing toward the group. The first man turned as John approached, his eyes widening in surprise. He was larger than John had expected, but Dusty was fast and sure-footed. John swung a rope he carried for handling cattle, lassoing the man's legs and sending him tumbling into the dust. The other men hesitated, unsure whether to continue the chase or flee, and that hesitation was all John needed. With a shout, he urged Dusty forward, cutting between the woman and her pursuers. The men tried to regroup, but John was determined. He kicked up dust and rocks with his horse, forcing them to scatter. By the time the last man turned to retreat, the young woman had reached the edge of the canyon, panting and wide-eyed. John reined in Dusty and approached her slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You're safe now," he said gently, though his voice carried across the canyon. "No one will hurt you while I'm here." She looked at him, unsure whether to trust this stranger. Her dark eyes were wide, filled with both fear and curiosity. She spoke a few words in her own language, rapid and melodic, but John could not understand them. He shook his head, giving a small, reassuring smile. "I don't understand, but I want to help you," he said. After a tense moment, she nodded slightly, a fragile gesture of trust. John offered his hand, and she took it cautiously, letting him guide her away from the canyon edge. Once they were a safe distance from the trail, he dismounted and led Dusty alongside her. "Where were they taking you?" he asked softly, hoping she could explain. She hesitated, then pointed toward the hills on the far side of the canyon, then back toward the village nestled below. John realized she had been fleeing from somewhere she called home, though the exact reason remained unclear. Whatever it was, she had run for her life, and he knew she needed protection. They reached a small clearing where the grass grew thick and soft. John gave her some water from his canteen and offered a piece of dried meat he carried for long days in the field. She took it gratefully, though her hands trembled slightly. John noticed the dirt and scratches on her arms and legs and realized she had traveled far, through thorny brush and jagged rocks to escape. As the sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls with shades of orange and red, John knew he had to make a decision. He could not leave her here alone, not with the danger still lingering. "You can come with me," he said. "I have a ranch nearby. It's safe there and you'll be protected." The woman looked uncertain. She glanced toward the distant mountains, her lips pressing together as if weighing a choice she had not wanted to face. Finally, she nodded, trusting him enough to accept his offer. John helped her mount a spare horse he had saddled earlier, and together they rode toward his ranch. The journey was quiet, filled with the sounds of hooves on soft earth, the whisper of wind through the trees, and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. John could feel her tension gradually easing, though she still kept a wary distance. He did not push her to speak, allowing silence to build a sense of safety instead. As they neared the ranch, the first lights of evening glimmered through the windows of the main house. John's hands were steady as he guided the horses into the corral, speaking gently to both animals and rider. Once they were settled, he led her inside, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across the wooden walls. The ranch hands, curious at first, watched in silence. John introduced her as best as he could, though the language barrier remained. She simply nodded, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the strange tools, the smell of cooked food, and the soft warmth of the fire. It was a new world for her, one filled with unfamiliar sounds and sights, yet she sensed the safety and kindness in John's demeanor. Over the next few hours, John helped her clean her wounds, bandaging scratches and bruises. He offered her fresh clothes, simple but comfortable, and showed her a small bed near the hearth. She accepted everything with quiet gratitude, occasionally offering a shy smile. John could see her strength and courage, even in these small gestures. As the night settled over the ranch, John reflected on the day's events. He had acted instinctively, without thought for danger to himself, yet he did not regret it. The woman before him was brave, resourceful, and in need of protection, and he could not ignore that. He knew the journey ahead might be difficult. There were dangers in the wilderness, tensions between settlers and the Apache, and uncertainty in every direction. But he also knew that today had changed something in both their lives. By the time the fire burned low, she had fallen asleep, her head resting lightly on a folded blanket. John sat nearby, watching the flames dance and feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had saved a life today, but he also knew that this was only the beginning. There were challenges ahead, choices to make, and paths that would test both of them in ways they could not yet imagine. Outside, the night was still and clear, the stars stretching endlessly across the sky. Somewhere beyond the hills, the canyon lay silent, hiding its dangers. But for now, in the warmth of the ranch, the young Apache woman was safe, and John McAllister felt a deep, unspoken bond forming between them. A bond built on courage, trust, and the unexpected meeting of two very different lives. The first step of an extraordinary story had begun. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the wide plains, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The ranch looked peaceful in the early light, with the sound of cattle moving in the corral and the faint creak of Dusty's reins as John checked on his horses. But peace, John knew, was always fragile in these lands. The events of the previous day weighed heavily on his mind, though he tried to focus on the tasks at hand. The young Apache woman, Aeon, had woken early. She moved quietly through the cabin, careful not to disturb John or the ranch hands. Her dark eyes held a mixture of curiosity and caution as she observed the new surroundings. Everything seemed strange and different. The smell of cooked meat, the sound of the fire crackling, and the warm wooden walls of the house. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt a small sense of safety. John found her in the kitchen, examining the simple tools and containers he used to prepare meals. He smiled gently, noticing how carefully she touched each item. "You're welcome to everything here," he said. "Feel free to ask if you need anything. I'll help you as best I can." Aeon tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing together. She did not speak English, and John did not understand her language, but somehow they communicated through gestures and expressions. She pointed to the table and then to herself, signaling that she was hungry. John nodded, understanding immediately. He prepared a small meal of bread, dried meat, and fresh water, placing it before her. As she ate, John kept watch over the window, scanning the distant hills and trails. He knew the outlaws or other men who had been chasing her might still be nearby. The safety of the ranch depended on vigilance, and he could not afford to be careless. Yet he also realized that Aeon needed more than protection. She needed trust, friendship, and a sense of normal life, even if only for a little while. After breakfast, John led Aeon outside. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of wild grasses and distant pine trees. He showed her around the ranch, pointing out the barn, the corral, and the fields where the cattle grazed. She listened carefully, her eyes wide with interest. For someone who had lived close to the wilderness, this was a different kind of life, organized, steady, and yet strangely comforting. John handed her a small rope and demonstrated how to secure a calf in the corral. Aeon watched with intense concentration, then tried it herself. At first, her hands fumbled, but with John's gentle guidance, she learned quickly. There was a natural intelligence in her movements, a sharp awareness that reminded John of the wild, untamed land she had come from. He felt a deep respect for her courage and resilience. The ranch hands, who had been wary of the newcomer, began to relax as they watched her. She did not complain, she did not falter, and she showed a willingness to help. They offered smiles and small gestures of friendship, and though there was still a language barrier, a silent understanding grew. For the first time in weeks, John noticed Aeon's tense shoulders relax slightly, and he felt hope that she might find some sense of peace here. As the day wore on, John and Aeon returned to the fields to check on the cattle. The herd was healthy and calm, but John could see that Aeon's gaze often drifted toward the distant hills. She was alert, always aware of the landscape beyond the ranch. John did not ask her thoughts. He understood that her past experiences had taught her caution. He simply rode beside her, sharing the silence, letting her feel safe without pressing for explanations she might not be ready to give. During a brief rest, John offered her water from his canteen. She accepted gratefully, and then slowly she reached out to touch Dusty's mane. The horse nickered softly, sensing her gentleness. John smiled, realizing that small moments like this could help bridge the gap between fear and trust. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds began to gather over the distant mountains. A storm was approaching, and John knew the winds and rain could be dangerous if they were caught outside. He guided Aeon back toward the ranch, moving quickly but carefully. Along the way, he pointed out the signs of weather changes, the smell of rain in the air, the movement of the clouds, and the behavior of the cattle. Aeon nodded, clearly learning from him, and he felt a quiet pride in her ability to adapt. When they returned, the first drops of rain began to fall. The cabin's roof provided shelter, but the sound of the storm outside made the room feel cozy and secure. John prepared a warm meal and sat with Aeon, encouraging her to eat. She hesitated at first, still cautious, but the hunger in her eyes was stronger than her fear. As she ate, John told stories of the ranch, tales of cattle drives, storms they had survived, and moments of unexpected kindness from strangers. She listened intently, occasionally gesturing in response, and John realized that storytelling, even without perfect words, could create a bond stronger than language alone. After the meal, the storm raged outside, sending sheets of rain across the plains. John and Aeon sat near the fire, the warmth and light creating a protective bubble against the wildness outside. He could see the weariness in her eyes, the tension of days spent running, hiding, and fearing for her life. Slowly, she leaned back, resting against a soft blanket, and for the first time, she allowed herself to relax completely. John watched over her silently, understanding that trust could not be rushed, and that patience was as vital as protection. As night fell, John stepped outside for a moment, listening to the rain drumming against the roof and the distant rumble of thunder. The plains looked mysterious and powerful in the storm, and he thought of the dangers that might still be lurking beyond the ranch. Yet he felt a quiet determination. He had saved her once, and he would do so again if necessary. The thought gave him purpose, a sense that his life had taken on a new meaning, one that involved courage, care, and an unexpected responsibility. Returning to the cabin, John found Aeon awake, watching the fire. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and something gentler, trust perhaps, or gratitude. He offered her a small smile and sat beside her. Though they spoke no words, the shared silence was comforting. For the first time, John felt that they were not just two strangers thrown together by circumstance, but companions navigating a difficult, unpredictable world. Over the next few days, their routine settled into a rhythm. John taught Aeon the ways of the ranch, feeding the cattle, caring for the horses, mending fences, and tending to daily chores. She learned quickly, her hands strong and her mind sharp. At the same time, John learned about her courage, her resilience, and the quiet determination that had carried her through danger. He began to see her not only as someone in need of protection, but as a partner in facing the challenges of life on the frontier. The ranch hands grew fond of her as well. Though initially cautious, they came to admire her bravery and willingness to help. She did not speak their language, but actions and expressions became a new kind of communication. Laughter occasionally filled the air as she tried new tasks, making mistakes and learning from them with good humor. The bond between her and John strengthened with each passing day, built on mutual respect, understanding, and the shared experience of facing danger together. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in brilliant orange and purple, John and Aeon stood on a hill overlooking the ranch. Dusty grazed nearby, and the cattle moved slowly across the fields. John noticed the quiet confidence in her stance, the way she observed the land with the keen awareness of someone who had lived close to nature. He realized that her presence had changed the ranch as much as the ranch had changed her. There was a balance now, a sense of connection between humans, animals, and the land, strengthened by trust and shared experience. As darkness fell, the first stars appeared in the sky. John and Aeon returned to the cabin, feeling the satisfaction of a day spent learning, working, and growing together. Though danger still existed beyond the ranch, they had created a small world of safety, understanding, and mutual respect. John knew that challenges lay ahead, that the past and the outside world might try to intrude, but for now he felt hope. Aeon, seated by the fire, began to hum a quiet tune, a song from her homeland. John listened, fascinated by the gentle melody. It was a reminder of her strength, her culture, and the life she had carried with her through fear and danger. Though he could not understand the words, the song spoke of resilience, courage, and the unspoken connection forming between them. In those quiet moments, John realized that saving Aeon had been only the first step. The journey ahead would test them both, through challenges, misunderstandings, and the unknown. But it would also offer moments of connection, learning, and perhaps even friendship and respect that could last a lifetime. As the fire dwindled and the night grew deep, John sat back, feeling a sense of peace and determination. The ranch had given him purpose before, but now it had given him someone to protect, guide, and learn from. Aeon had brought new life into his world, and he knew that together they could face whatever the plains, the hills, or the distant dangers might throw their way. And so, with the night stretching endlessly outside and the fire's warmth surrounding them, the first real bond between John McAllister and Aeon took root, a bond that would carry them through storms, challenges, and the uncertain paths ahead. Days passed, and the bond between John McAllister and Aon grew stronger. Life on the ranch had settled into a routine, but the calm could not last forever. Aon often gazed toward the distant hills, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of longing and worry. John noticed her unease and understood without words that her journey was not over. She belonged to a world beyond the ranch, a place she had fled from but could not forget. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the plains, John decided it was time to confront what they both had been avoiding. "Aon," he said gently, "I think we should take you back to your village. I cannot keep you here forever and your people will be worried." Aon's eyes widened at first. She had grown comfortable at the ranch, learning the rhythms of daily work and feeling the safety John had created for her. Yet, she knew he was right. Her family, especially her father, would be searching for her. There was no avoiding the journey back, and the thought of facing her village again filled her with tension. She nodded silently, understanding his words, and began preparing for the trip. John packed supplies for the journey: dried meat, fresh water, blankets, and some tools for survival. He saddled Dusty and checked the other horses, making sure they were strong and ready for the trip. Aon followed his preparations with careful attention, learning from his actions. Though they could not speak the same language, gestures and expressions communicated understanding. John admired her intelligence and courage. She was no ordinary girl, and he knew the journey ahead would test them both. As they rode toward the hills, the landscape changed. The flat, open plains gave way to rocky paths, narrow trails, and dense clusters of trees. The wind whispered through the canyons, and the distant mountains seemed taller and more imposing than ever. John guided Aon carefully, pointing out hazards along the way and ensuring her safety. She listened, absorbed in the lessons, and her confidence in riding grew with each passing mile. Along the trail, they encountered signs of the past troubles that had driven Aon from her village. Broken branches, deep footprints, and faint traces of fires hinted that men had recently passed through. John's heart tightened with worry, knowing that danger was never far from someone as courageous and independent as Aon. He urged her to stay close, and together they moved with quiet determination. At night, they made camp in a small clearing near a stream. The air was cool, and the sound of flowing water provided a soothing background to their quiet routine. John built a fire and prepared a small meal. Aon watched intently, occasionally helping with simple tasks. Though she still struggled with the language, a silent understanding had developed between them, and she began to trust John completely. During the evening, as they sat near the fire, Aon reached into a small pouch she carried and pulled out a simple charm, a carved piece of wood with markings John could not understand. She held it out to him briefly, then tucked it back into her pouch. John realized it was important to her, a connection to her past, her family, and her identity. He respected it and made a silent promise to protect her, no matter what lay ahead. The journey continued for several days. The path became steeper, the trails narrower, and the challenges greater. They crossed streams, climbed rocky hills, and navigated through dense forests. Each obstacle tested their endurance, but they grew stronger together. John admired Aon's resilience, and she began to see him not only as a protector but as a guide and companion. On the fourth day, they caught sight of smoke rising from the distant village. Aon's heart raced, and John noticed the change in her expression. She pointed toward the smoke and then at herself, signaling her return. John nodded, understanding that the most difficult moment was approaching, the confrontation with her family, especially her father, Chief Takoda. As they neared the village, the sounds of daily life reached them: children laughing, people talking in their own language, and the faint beat of drums in the distance. Aon's steps grew hesitant, and John slowed his pace. He knew this was unfamiliar territory for him and could be dangerous, but he also knew that honesty and courage were essential. He rode beside Aeon, offering silent reassurance. The village emerged from the trees, a collection of carefully constructed homes with open spaces for gatherings and communal life. People paused to watch the newcomers, whispering and exchanging curious glances. Aeon's presence was immediately noticed, and murmurs spread quickly. John could see the tension building as they approached the central area where the chief would likely be waiting. Chief Takoda, a tall and imposing man with strong features and eyes that reflected wisdom and authority, stepped forward. He had heard rumors of Aeon's escape and of the stranger who had helped her. His expression was stern, and his voice, when he spoke, was deep and commanding. "Who is this man?" he asked in a language John could not understand, though the tone made his intentions clear. John dismounted and approached with respect, hands held loosely at his sides. He spoke slowly, choosing simple gestures and calm expressions to communicate. He indicated that he had helped Aeon, kept her safe, and meant no harm. Aeon stood close by, glancing at her father and then at John, silently advocating for him. The chief's eyes narrowed, evaluating John carefully. There was a long silence as he studied the man who had risked his life for his daughter. Finally, he spoke again, his voice a mixture of curiosity and authority. He demanded to know why John had intervened and whether his intentions were honorable. John responded with gestures, pointing to Aeon, then himself, and finally to the open plains and the ranch, showing that he had only wanted to protect her. Aeon stepped forward, speaking in her own language. Though John could not understand her words, he could see the strength and confidence in her voice. She was explaining the truth, advocating for John, and showing her father that he had acted with honor. Chief Takoda's expression softened slightly, though the authority in his posture remained. After a long pause, the chief made his intentions clear. He respected John's courage and honesty, but explained that trust must be earned. In his culture, respect, loyalty, and responsibility were tested through actions, not words. He would not allow his daughter to be married or taken away lightly. John would have to prove himself worthy, demonstrating that he could honor both Aeon and her family. John nodded solemnly, understanding the challenge. He had anticipated that the journey would not end simply with Aeon's return, and he was prepared to show his worth through deeds, as the chief required. He would face whatever trials were set before him, not out of obligation alone, but because he respected the chief's authority and the bond he had formed with Aeon. Aeon's eyes shone with gratitude and admiration. She had seen John's courage, his patience, and his unwavering commitment to her safety. She knew that he would face the challenge, and the thought brought her hope. The chief, too, seemed to recognize the genuine connection between the two, and while his expression remained serious, a spark of approval appeared in his eyes. The village watched quietly as the man who had rescued Aeon prepared for the test of his integrity and honor. John understood that this moment was crucial, not just for him, but for Aeon and her family. The trials ahead would not only measure his strength and courage, but also his character, patience, and respect for the traditions of the people he had come to care for. That evening, John and Aeon camped just outside the village, near a small stream. The air was cool and filled with the sounds of evening life, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the faint murmur of voices from the village. They sat together, sharing a simple meal in companionable silence. Though words were scarce, their bond was clear, mutual trust, respect, and an unspoken understanding of the challenges ahead. As the stars appeared in the night sky, John reflected on the journey so far. He had saved Aeon's life, gained her trust, and now faced the task of earning the respect of her people. The path ahead would not be easy, but he felt prepared. Courage, honesty, and action would guide him, just as they had guided him through the plains and the canyon. Aeon, meanwhile, felt a mix of relief and anticipation. She was returning home, Yet she knew the road ahead required bravery and faith in the man who had risked so much for her. Together, they would face the unknown, navigating cultural differences, trials, and the expectations of her family. The bond they had formed would be their strength, a bridge between two very different worlds. And so, under the quiet light of the stars, John and Aeon prepared for the next step in their journey. The village awaited, the chief had set the challenge, and the test of courage, honor, and trust was about to begin. Their story was far from over, but the foundation of bravery, respect, and mutual care had already been laid, a foundation that would carry them through the trials to come. The morning sun rose over the Apache village, casting long shadows across the central gathering area where Chief Takoda waited. John McAllister and Aeon stood nearby, the air thick with tension. The villagers had gathered, their eyes wide with curiosity and quiet speculation. This was no ordinary day. It was the moment when John's honor, courage, and respect for Aeon's family would be tested. Chief Takoda, tall and strong, his face lined with wisdom and authority, looked John directly in the eye. There was no anger in his gaze now, only the weight of expectation. He had heard Aeon's account and observed John's actions, but words alone were not enough. In their culture, respect and honor were proven through deeds, through tangible acts that showed responsibility, loyalty, and strength. John stepped forward, keeping his hands visible and his posture respectful. He spoke slowly, choosing simple words and calm gestures, making it clear that his intentions were honorable. Though he did not speak the chief's language, he used gestures to indicate care for Aeon, his willingness to follow the rules, and his respect for the traditions of the village. Aeon stood beside him, her dark eyes shining with trust and hope. She had seen John's courage, his patience, and his integrity, and she silently vouched for him with every glance. The chief's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained firm as he addressed John. "You have brought my daughter safely back to the village. You have shown bravery, yet bravery alone is not enough. If you wish to be worthy of her, you must prove your strength, your responsibility, and your respect for our people." He paused, letting his words sink in. The villagers watched in silence, their attention fixed on the unfolding moment. John nodded, understanding the weight of the challenge. He had faced danger on the plains and in the canyons, but this was different. This was a test of character as much as courage, and he had to meet it to honor the trust Aeon had placed in him. "I am ready," he said simply, hoping his calm voice and steady posture would convey his sincerity. Chief Takoda's eyes narrowed slightly, then he spoke again, his voice rising to carry across the assembly. "You shall prove your worth by showing that you can provide, protect, and honor the bonds of family. Take 400 cattle from your own herd and bring them here. Only then will you show that you are capable of responsibility, loyalty, and respect worthy of my daughter." A murmur ran through the gathered villagers. 400 cattle was a vast number, even for a rancher like John. The task would test his planning, endurance, and leadership, but John did not flinch. He had never failed to meet a challenge he had committed to, and he would not fail now. He gave a small nod, signaling his acceptance, and turned to Aeon, who smiled faintly, relief and admiration shining in her eyes. The next days were filled with preparation. John returned to his ranch, a long ride across the plains with only the rising and setting sun to mark the hours. Dusty carried him steadily, while John's mind raced with calculations. How would he move the cattle safely? How would he ensure none were lost to wild animals, thieves, or rough terrain? Each decision mattered, and he approached the task with careful determination. He selected the strongest and healthiest cows from his herd, 400 in all, making sure to leave enough behind to continue running his ranch. He organized the ranch hands, assigning them tasks to help guide the cattle, secure the herd, and manage the logistics of the journey. They respected John's leadership, inspired by his courage and calm decisiveness. Even though the task seemed enormous, they trusted that he could accomplish it. As they set out, John led the cattle across the rolling plains, a long line stretching for miles. He rode ahead, keeping an eye on the herd, anticipating obstacles and planning safe paths. Rivers had to be crossed carefully, rough terrain navigated slowly, and natural dangers avoided. Each day brought new challenges: a sudden thunderstorm that threatened to scatter the herd, a narrow cliffside path where one wrong step could cause disaster, and predators lurking in the tall grasses. Through it all, John remained steady. He encouraged the ranch hands, solved problems quickly, and used his knowledge of the land to guide the herd safely. At night, they camped in secure locations, feeding the cattle and resting before continuing at first light. Aon had accompanied him partway, returning briefly to the village when needed, and she had shared quiet encouragement, her presence a constant reminder of the trust and responsibility John carried. Along the way, John reflected on the meaning of the challenge. It was not just about moving cattle or proving wealth. It was about demonstrating care, foresight, and integrity. Every decision mattered, and every step showed that he could honor both Aon and her family. He understood that the chief's challenge was as much a test of his heart and mind as of his physical ability. After several days of careful travel, the herd approached the Apache village. John had kept meticulous control, ensuring that all 400 cattle arrived safely, healthy, and calm. The villagers gathered again, this time watching not just with curiosity, but with respect. They could see the skill, patience, and dedication required to accomplish such a task. John's efforts were clear to all, and the chief's eyes reflected recognition of his determination. When John approached the chief with the herd, he gestured toward the cattle, then toward Aon, showing that he had completed the task with honor. Chief Takoda studied the herd, nodding slowly, and then looked at John. "You have brought the cattle as I requested," he said, his voice carrying authority and approval. "You have shown responsibility, courage, and respect. You have proven yourself worthy." Aon's eyes sparkled with joy and relief. She stepped forward, her expression warm and proud. She had seen John face the challenge, meet the expectations of her father, and honor the trust she had placed in him. The villagers clapped quietly, a gesture of respect and approval, acknowledging John's accomplishment and the bond he had formed with their community. Chief Takoda then spoke words that carried great weight. "John McAllister," he said, "you have shown strength, honor, and loyalty. You have risked your life for my daughter and completed the task I set before you. Therefore, I offer you not only my respect but also the hand of my daughter in marriage, along with these 400 cattle as a symbol of trust and unity." A hush fell over the village as John and Aon looked at each other. The challenge had been immense, the task daunting, yet they had both endured it together, side by side. John nodded respectfully to the chief, understanding the honor and responsibility being placed upon him. He then turned to Aon, offering a small smile. She returned it, her eyes filled with gratitude, trust, and affection. The villagers celebrated the union, welcoming John not just as a protector, but as a trusted member of their community. The cattle were safely integrated into the village's holdings, symbolizing the partnership between John and the chief, between two cultures, and between two lives brought together by courage and respect. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in brilliant colors, John and Aon stood side by side, overlooking the plains. Dusty grazed nearby, the herd resting peacefully after the long journey. John reflected on the challenge they had faced, not just the physical demands, but the lessons in trust, honor, and understanding. He realized that true courage was not just in facing danger, but in respecting others, keeping promises, and protecting those who depend on you. Aon, leaning slightly against him, felt a sense of peace she had not known for months. She had been through fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet now she saw the strength of the man who had saved her and proven himself to her father. She trusted him completely, knowing that together they could face whatever the future held. The night fell gently over the village. Fires burned in the homes, and the sounds of celebration echoed through the air. John and Aeon sat together, sharing a simple meal, reflecting on the day's events. Though words were few, their bond was strong, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. They had faced the challenge, met the expectations, and emerged stronger, not just as individuals but as a pair. In the quiet moments before sleep, John felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. The task had tested him in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally, but he had succeeded. More importantly, he had honored Aeon and her family, proving that courage, integrity, and respect could bridge worlds and create bonds that would last a lifetime. And so, under the soft glow of the fire and the starlit sky, John McAllister and Aeon began a new chapter in their lives. One built on trust, courage, and the shared understanding that true honor is shown through action, loyalty, and care for those we love. The challenge had been great, but their hearts and spirits had proven greater. The days after John McAllister completed Chief Takoda's challenge were filled with a quiet excitement in the village. Word of his courage and skill had spread quickly, and the villagers now regarded him with respect and admiration. John moved among them with ease, helping where he could, checking the cattle and learning about the customs of the community. Aeon stayed close, her presence a constant reminder of the bond they shared and the journey they had undertaken together. Chief Takoda watched everything carefully. Though his stern demeanor remained, there was a glimmer of approval in his eyes. He had tested John, observing not only his physical strength but his patience, his intelligence, and his integrity. Now, as the time for the formal union approached, the chief felt a sense of satisfaction. The man who had risked his life to save his daughter had also proven himself capable of honor, responsibility, and respect. Preparations for the ceremony began immediately. The village gathered materials, decorations, and food for the celebration. Simple but beautiful arrangements were made. Colorful cloths hung from the wooden beams of the communal hall, and fires were prepared to cook a feast for the family and friends. Children ran through the village with excitement, curious to witness the wedding of the brave rancher who had come from the plains. John, meanwhile, took part in the preparations with his usual calm efficiency. He helped organize the livestock, arranged for supplies, and even assisted with the decorations. Though he had never participated in such a ceremony before, he understood the importance of showing respect for the customs and traditions of Aeon's people. His efforts did not go unnoticed. The villagers watched with quiet admiration, recognizing that he had fully embraced both the challenge and the community. Aeon, dressed in a simple but elegant traditional outfit, moved gracefully among the villagers, assisting where she could and sharing smiles with those around her. Though she had returned home only recently, she had grown comfortable in her surroundings again. She had confidence now, not only in John's abilities but in her own strength. She had endured fear, danger, and uncertainty, and she had witnessed the courage and honor of the man she would soon marry. Her heart was full of hope, trust, and anticipation. The morning of the ceremony arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze. The villagers gathered in the central area, forming a large circle around the open space where John and Aeon would stand. Chief Takoda took his place at the front, his expression serious but calm. The air was filled with quiet anticipation, the sound of soft conversations, and the rustling of leaves blending into a peaceful harmony. John and Aeon approached the center together. Dusty followed quietly, and some of the other ranch animals were nearby, a small reminder of John's world and the journey that had brought them here. The chief's eyes studied John carefully, measuring not only his posture but the respect he showed toward the traditions and the people present. John met the chief's gaze steadily, demonstrating his willingness to honor the customs and his deep respect for Aeon and her family. Chief Takoda spoke first, his voice carrying authority and warmth. He recounted the story of Aeon's escape, John's bravery, and the long journey of trust and courage that had led them to this moment. He praised John for his honor, his patience, and his integrity, acknowledging that he had proven himself worthy not only through the completion of the cattle challenge, but through the kindness and respect he had shown to the village and its people. As the chief finished speaking, John stepped forward and turned to Aeon. He took her hands gently in his, their fingers interlocking. Though they spoke different languages, the connection between them was clear. Their eyes met, and no words were needed to express the trust, admiration, and affection they felt for each other. Aeon smiled softly, her heart swelling with emotion. She had witnessed John's courage, his patience, and his unwavering dedication to protecting her, and now she was ready to share her life with him. The ceremony continued with simple but meaningful rituals. Chief Takoda performed blessings over the couple, using symbols of the land, the animals, and the spirits that watched over the village. John and Aeon listened respectfully, absorbing the traditions and honoring the community that had become an important part of their journey. The villagers joined in, offering their approval and support, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. When the blessings were complete, Chief Takoda spoke words that carried great significance. He declared John officially worthy of Aeon, acknowledging the courage, honor, and responsibility he had demonstrated. He spoke of trust, respect, and unity, emphasizing that the bond between John and Aeon was not only a union of two people, but also a symbol of friendship and cooperation between their worlds. With the chief's blessing, John and Aeon exchanged gestures that symbolized their commitment to each other. John offered a simple token from his own world, a small piece of leather carved with a pattern of the plains and cattle, while Aeon presented a charm from her people, a carved piece of wood that had accompanied her through her journey. Each token represented respect, trust, and the promise to honor one another and the lives they shared. The villagers celebrated with joy. Fires crackled, and the aroma of cooked food filled the air. Children ran and laughed, elders shared stories, and music and soft chants added rhythm and harmony to the celebration. John and Aeon moved through the crowd, receiving smiles, congratulations, and gestures of welcome from the people who had become a part of their story. As the evening progressed, John took a moment to reflect. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with challenges, danger, and uncertainty. He had faced wild terrain, outlaws, and the demanding expectations of a proud chief. Yet through it all, he had demonstrated courage, integrity, and respect, earning not only Aeon's trust but the approval of her family and community. The bond he shared with Aeon was now stronger than ever, forged through experience, patience, and mutual care. Aeon, too, reflected on the journey. She had fled danger, relying on her own courage and instincts to survive. She had met a man who had risked everything to save her, and she had seen his honor and dedication firsthand. Now, as they celebrated together, she felt a sense of peace and joy. The challenges had not only tested their strength but had also brought them closer, creating a partnership built on trust, courage, and mutual respect. As the night sky stretched above the village, filled with stars that sparkled like tiny flames, the celebration continued. John and Aeon sat together near a fire, sharing quiet conversation and laughter. Though their words were simple, the connection between them was profound. They had faced danger together, overcome challenges, and honored traditions, and now they could look forward to a future built on trust, love, and unity. The feast continued late into the night. Villagers shared stories of their ancestors, the plains, and the mountains, and John listened with fascination, learning about a world very different from his own. Aeon translated as best she could, bridging the gap between their worlds. Together, they laughed, shared meals, and celebrated not only their union but the bonds between their communities. As the fire burned low and the village quieted, John and Aeon walked to a nearby hill overlooking the plains. Dusty followed, grazing quietly, and the other animals rested nearby. From this vantage point, the vast expanse of land stretched out in every direction, a reminder of the journey they had taken and the adventures that still lay ahead. John put his arm around Aeon, feeling the warmth and comfort of her presence. "We've come a long way," he said softly, his voice full of admiration. Aeon leaned against him, her hand resting in his. Though their languages were different, the emotions they shared were clear: gratitude, respect, and love. They had faced trials together, and now they had earned a future filled with possibilities. The night was calm, with only the sounds of the wind and the distant calls of animals breaking the silence. John and Aeon remained on the hill, reflecting on their journey and the trust that had grown between them. They had faced danger, navigated challenges, and honored traditions, and now they were ready to embrace a life together. The following days were filled with quiet routines and shared responsibilities. John continued to care for the ranch and the cattle, while Aeon assisted and learned, blending the skills of her people with the ways of the plains. Together, they built a life of cooperation, respect, and love, showing that courage and integrity could bridge worlds and create bonds stronger than fear or uncertainty. The villagers continued to support and welcome them, recognizing that John was not only a protector and husband, but also a part of their community. The union of John and Aeon became a symbol of trust, honor, and the blending of two worlds, showing that courage, respect, and care could create lasting connections. And so, under the vast sky, filled with stars and the promise of the future, John McAllister and Aeon began their life together. They faced the world as partners, bound by courage, trust, and love, ready to meet whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead. Their story had started with danger and uncertainty, but it ended with hope, unity, and the enduring strength of two hearts joined in respect, honor, and devotion.